Hi, my name is Janice, fitness and sports instructor at CFB Kingston. Today, I'm bringing to you a sports workshop. I'm going to be talking about neuromuscular training, specifically utilizing neuromuscular training for warm-ups for various sports for injury prevention. So why do we warm up? I'm sure if I asked any one of you who are watching this right now, number one thing somebody would say was to warm up and activate those muscles, increasing the blood flow to those muscles, lubricating the joints, that kind of thing. So yes, those are two very important things for warming up, increasing the blood flow to those muscles. Yep, number one, lubricating the joints to build joint resiliency, getting those joints moving. But then we also can't forget about the psychological benefits of the warm-up, especially for sport, as that is what helps to get the players prepared to play, gets them in that mindset and ready for action to play their sport. And then number one, biggest important thing for why we warm up is obviously to reduce the risk of injury to our athletes while they are participating in their sport. So what are the components of a good warm-up? So obviously some gross motor movements, getting each one of those body parts moving. For the most part, we consider this kind of aerobic activity. So light jogging, skipping, arm circles, things like that. Then we've got some dynamic stretching and mobility exercises, getting all those joints moving, lengthening out those muscles a little bit. So we're not doing static stretching. This is dynamic stretching. So think more of flowing between movements, holding them just briefly, not for a lengthy period of time. And then sport or activity specific movements. So things that are going to be specific to, say, soccer or hockey, rugby, that kind of activity that you're going to include in a warm-up. So here is where neuromuscular training is going to come into the mix. So we're tying in all of these warm-up components into one comprehensive program that's going to be neuromuscular training. So it is a relatively new concept, new method of warming up that is starting to come to the forefront. The University of Calgary has been doing some extensive research on it. And the FIFA organization, so soccer organization, has really gotten into using these methods as well over the past few years. So what is neuromuscular training? So it is a form of training that teaches the nerves how to make the muscles work more consistently in the best movement patterns that are going to help to reduce that injury risk. So what I mean by best movement patterns. So best movement patterns means that you're moving with the proper alignment within those movement patterns to give you the most benefit at reducing that injury risk. So we're strengthening the connection between the nervous system and the muscular system so that we're getting optimal muscle activation from that nerve innervation. And if we have that optimal muscle activation, it's going to help to improve joint stability as well, as those muscles are going to activate quicker to stabilize those joints. So why neuromuscular training? So as previously mentioned, it's going to teach the nerves how to make the muscles work in a way that improves those fundamental movement patterns and increasing performance and lowering injury risk. So there has been research done that shows that this type of warm-up program is significantly effective at reducing the risk of sport-related injury in youth. And this is also going to carry over to adult sport as well. So they have seen a 30 to 70% decrease in sport-related injuries in that youth classification. So for the most part, this was 14 plus. Compared to more traditional warm-up programs, those that would include aerobic movements, so gross motor movements, static stretching, and dynamic stretching. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, FIFA has done some research on this and has implemented the FIFA 11 Plus program, specific to soccer, but a lot of it carries over to other sports as well. So movements can be modified based on whatever sport is being done. And since it's been implemented, this program has seen a 32% decrease in sport-related injuries in male athletes and a 46% decrease in female athletes in that 14 plus age category. So that's pretty significant. The goal of neuromuscular training is to work towards optimal motor development. So it gives the athletes the skills and the physical literacy to appreciate more how their body moves and to understand a little bit more how their body moves so that they can execute the appropriate movements in their sports setting and stabilizing the joints, stabilizing the core in order to decrease their potential for injury. So what are the components of a neuromuscular training warm-up? I will note before I get into this slide that these warm-ups are not just for one sport. Yes, the warm-up will be sport specific in that some of the exercises that you incorporate into the different components will be specific for the sport, but the general layout of the warm-up can be applied to many different sports. So as I mentioned, the FIFA uses this kind of warm-ups. Obviously soccer, it can be utilized for soccer, basketball, volleyball, hockey, rugby is another big one. Rugby, they're actually implementing this through the University of Calgary for their youth sports out in Alberta. Football, tennis, lacrosse. So it can be used across a wide range of sports. So it's going to be a sport-specific warm-up that includes the following components: an aerobic component, a balance component, a strength component, and an agility component. And little to no equipment is required for this warm-up. So for most of them, you'll just be using body weight. You can use partners for different exercises. I know during COVID, partners isn't always possible. So utilizing a wall or a barrier of some sort or resistance bands. So the movements are going to progress in a sequence from less intense and less skill involved to more intense and more skill involved. So they progress from aerobic movements to strength movements to balance movements to agility or change in direction type movements. So wanting to make sure, another big thing with your movements, is that your athletes are focusing on proper technique. So make sure you're cueing them along the way for proper technique, proper posture. That's going to be a big one. Pay attention to their posture, good body control. So you're emphasizing quality over how fast they're actually going through the movements. We're not focusing on speed for any of this warm-up. Even the agility portion, you're not really working on speed. Making sure that knees are going to be tracking over the toes. On any of the jumping movements that the athletes have got soft landings, they're landing more like a cat than an elephant, and making sure there's some straight leg alignment as well. And with any of the hinging movements, that there's no rounding of the back. So they're actually hinging at the hips, keeping that chest open, leading with that chest, pushing those hips back. And some of these components between some of the exercises between the different components, there could be some overlap as well. So don't be concerned if you do a movement in, say, strength, and then it would also tie into balance. That's perfectly fine and perfectly normal. So getting into a sample neuromuscular training warm-up that you can utilize with your athletes, I am including a portion after the slideshow where I'm actually demonstrating, going a few movements of each of the exercises. So I'll go through the whole warm-up, not doing it to the full extent, but just demonstrating each one of the exercises. But for the aerobic exercise portion, you're going to want to make sure that you have some cones set up. So the farthest cones approximately 20 meters apart. And then you're going to stagger some cones as well that you can use for the zigzag running and zigzag shuffling. and then also for your wind sprints. So having maybe about 4 of them set up that they can use to go out and back, out and back, out and back. So for the aerobic type exercises, we're going to include some light jogging. So you got 20 meters of light jogging, forward skipping, lateral skipping. This one is a little tricky. It takes a little bit more coordination. Some younger athletes will struggle with this one, but the more they do it, the easier it's going to get for them. So just always making sure that hips are not splaying out, that their knees, as they're pulling their knee up, it's not going out from the body. So straight up, straight down. High knee jogging, butt kick jogging, side shuffles, karaoke or grapevine. So that's 1 foot in front, then it goes behind, shuffling down, zigzag running, so going out to the cone, over to another cone, back and forth. Same thing with shuffling. And then your wind sprints, running forward to the cone, back pedaling back to the start, forward to the second cone, back pedaling, and so forth. So once you've completed those aerobic exercises at least 1 time through, you can go through each one of them twice if you'd like. Then you're going to move on to your strength exercises. So for the strength exercises, you want to aim for 30 seconds for each exercise, at least 2 sets through. So some examples of strength exercise you can be doing are squats, walking or alternating lunges, lateral lunges. So with this one, make sure that your athletes are pushing their hips back and they're not leaning out too far, pushing their hips over that bent outside leg. And then working to activate that core, we've got plank and we've got side plank. If there are other strength exercises that you want to incorporate that apply a little bit more to whichever sport you are coaching or leading, you can add that in here as well. These are just some samples to kind of keep it simple. So once those strength exercises are done, we are moving into your balance exercises. So this is all going to be unilateral. So starting on one leg, then going to the other leg. So you could do all the exercises on one leg before switching to the other leg, or you can alternate back and forth and do each individual exercise, right leg, left leg, and so forth. For this one as well, it's also going to be 30 seconds, at least 2 sets. So some examples would be a single leg balance, single leg hinge or airplane. So when you're doing the hinging movements, as I mentioned earlier, make sure that your athletes are keeping their chest open. They're leading with their chest as they're coming forward. They're not rounding that upper back and they're pushing those hips back. So nice kind of runway takeoff, flat back as they hinge forward. And this is also a good strengthening exercise for the hamstrings. So that's where the balance and strength would tie in together for that particular exercise. Then we've got single leg balance with a ball pass. So whichever sport you're using, use that particular ball: basketball, soccer ball, volleyball, football, lacrosse ball, doesn't really matter. If you are not at the point where you can work with partners, you can use a wall, you can use some sort of rebounder, whatever that will send that ball back to that person who has thrown it. You can throw the ball up a little bit higher, make that partner work a little bit more to maintain their balance. And same with the single leg hinge. So once again, focusing with leading with that chest is open, reaching down towards that ground, rolling the ball along the ground to their partner or to the wall. Then once you have completed all those balance exercises, we are moving on to the agility exercises. So once again, this is not necessarily a speed thing, especially to start. Want to make sure that the athletes are keeping their knees over their toes, so the knee is not collapsing in towards the center, and that the hips are level, so they're not leaning one to one side or the other. So they're staying nice and upright, hips facing forward. So some examples for agility exercise: squat jumps in place, squat jumps forwards and backwards. These are all 2-foot jumps, and side to side like ski jumps. Then you'll move on to the single foot hops. So just jumping straight up and down 1 foot. Then you can switch the other foot. You can alternate feet. You can do like a hopscotch pattern, moving forward, moving back. Single foot hops laterally. So line jumps, jumping from one side of the line to the other. And then we've got bounding exercises. So you can do bounding either on the spot, just jumping side to side as far as the athlete can, or bounding forwards for that 20 meters. So one big jump, jump, jump all the way down to your 20-meter line. So that is our neuromuscular training warm-up. For those who want to incorporate this into their practice plans at the start of their practice. It should take about 15 to 20 minutes to complete this whole warm-up sequence. So you may need to allow for a little extra time, have your athletes arrive a little bit earlier, or just plan for that 15 to 20 minutes at the start of your practice. And try starting this right away and see what kind of difference it is going to make in your athletes and in your injury rates. See if you notice any difference, if you notice the strength building up in those joints, in those muscles, and just helping those athletes to be a little bit stronger in the movements. So if they're getting hit in hockey or if they're getting shouldered in soccer, see if they're able to maintain their stability and balance a little bit better, and if their injury rates are dropping down. So thanks for joining me today for this little workshop. Coming up next, I'll just be heading out to the gym floor to demonstrate each one of these exercises, but I'm hoping that you can take this information and start incorporating it into your sport programs. Have a great day. All right, so this is where we're going to go through the practical portion. So we've got our warm-up broken down into the aerobic portion, the strength portion, the balance portion, and the agility portion. So I did already go through all the exercises with you and tell you what they all were within the workshop itself. So now I'm just going to demonstrate it. So you are going to want to make sure that you have some cones set up to mark out your 20-meter distance for the aerobic portion. And then the strength, balance, and agility, as previously mentioned, is going to be 30 seconds for each one of the exercises, 2 times through. So I'm going to go through and demonstrate all of the exercises.
PSP Kingston, the health and wellness provider for the military community.